Hi, Petra, Christina, and Karula. How amazing. Please come in. That's wonderful. It's fantastic that you've managed to make it here, because I was worried that either we would have to do this on Zoom or, in fact, worst of all, we'd have to make a video. But now that you're actually here, we're going to be able to talk about it face to face, which always is much better. Please come in, have a seat, sit down, and make yourselves comfortable. Can I offer you a tea or a coffee? Oh, you had something on the plane, that's great. So, what are the questions that you'd like to discuss with me? Firstly, you're interested in what I have seen in other countries during the pandemic. Fortunately, we have programs in a wide range of countries, and we've been having online meetings with the various teams discussing what their experience is. And it's good to reflect on this because there's never been a worldwide closing down of schools in the way that's taken place in the last few months. I think the first message that comes back is the well-being of children and young people has been badly affected. The experience of school closure and being locked down at home has not been good for most young people. It's actually been quite traumatic. Being stuck at home with your family isn't necessarily a wonderful opportunity. Some families, it's absolutely fine, but for many, many families, this was very, very difficult. And certainly, the more disadvantaged the background of the pupils, the worse the experience has been. Being locked in very small spaces with your family, unable to go out, has been very difficult. The second thing to note is that whilst almost all the education systems around the world urged teachers to prepare work and send it home to the pupils to do so that their education could continue, this really hasn't happened. The Rowntree Foundation, which is one of the big educational foundations here in England, has done a big survey in which they have estimated that 60% of pupils did absolutely no work whatsoever during the lockdown period. And that's very serious, really, because it means there is a huge amount of catching up to do, and you should be aware of it. But also, I know that most of you have been preparing work and sending it home to pupils to do. If they haven't done much of it, then your experience is the same as most teachers around the world. Don't beat yourself up by it. This is the reality. The next thing that we can observe is the digital divide between children and young people in richer backgrounds to those in the more disadvantaged backgrounds is much bigger than we thought it was. I've been discussing this with the OECD, who did big surveys of children and young people to ask them if they had access to digital technology at home. This was prior to COVID-19, and the response that came is that most children did have access to digital technology. But what we've learnt through the lockdown is that they did not have proper access for reasonable amounts of time. Yes, there was a computer at home, but during lockdown, when the parents were at home, many of whom were trying to continue working, they didn't get access to the computers. Therefore, although schools were sending them material digitally, the children and young people were simply not collecting it. And it's a much bigger problem. And in terms of, as we move forward from here, I think that we have to recognize that digital access for many children is much worse, and therefore we have to resort to more traditional means of sending work home if that's what we want to do. But also, I think what we've learned is simply sending work home to children and young people is not sufficient. You have to maintain a relationship with them. So one of the schools that we've been working with in Norway, for instance, the head teacher said to the teachers, I want you to send work home for pupils to do every week. But in addition, I want you to be able to talk directly to the children and young people at least twice a week individually in one-to-one sessions, whether it's on the phone or whether it's online through Zoom or Teams or Skype, every week, twice a week, just a few minutes, one-to-one. And that has proved absolutely crucial in getting children and young people to do the work that's being sent home and to maintain the relationship and to ensure that that sense of still working together and you as an individual pupil being recognised and valued is constantly reinforced. So Petra, you'd also like to know what the impact on parents has been of the lockdown and the school closures. This has been very interesting to follow because we've had lots of feedback from parents. And I think, in a sense, the good news is that parents have realised they're not teachers. And I think there is far more respect amongst parents for teachers than there was before, because when parents tried to play the role of teachers, it didn't work. And this is a really important point for us to think about. A parent's relationship with a child is different from a teacher's relationship from a child. And it's very difficult to move from the parent relationship to the teacher relationship. And on the whole, I think that you should not be encouraging parents to try and make this switch. Rather than the parents taking the role of the teacher and teaching the child or young person, what the parent should do is develop much more of a role as a co-learner. So that rather than approaching the material in the sense that the parent knows it and is now trying to transmit it to the child in the way that a teacher does, the approach of the parent should be, let's learn this together, or even get the child or young person to teach the parent. Because the best way to learn something is to try and teach somebody else. That's a basic rule. The best way to learn is to teach it to somebody else. So if you give work to the young person as a parent, say, look at this, and when you've studied it, teach it to me, that would be much more powerful. One of the schools in Hungary that we were working in, the teachers were trying to stay in contact with the pupils on a one-to-one basis every week. One of the teachers, every time she spoke to one of the boys in her class, online or on the telephone, she was getting a very negative response. She could see that he was very close to tears. When asking about the work she'd sent home, he didn't really want to talk about it. The conversations were very brief. And she was very worried about what was going on, but couldn't get the boy online to talk about it. Now, the teacher happened to know that the boy's mother was a hairdresser. And as you probably know, during lockdown, all the hairdressers were closed. So she rang the mother and said, look, I know you're a hairdresser and the actual hairdresser shops are closed, but is there any chance, because I'm desperate for a haircut, that I could come round to the house and you could cut my hair? And the parent agreed to this, so she went round to the house to have her haircut. And when she was sitting there talking to the mother, she said, so how's it going during lockdown? And the mother said, oh, it's been absolutely terrible. I've been trying to work with my son. All this work comes home from school, but we end up having terrible fights the whole time and it doesn't work out. And he's really upset and it's not working at all. And so the teacher revealed to the parent that she was in fact the teacher and talked to her about the problems. And what became very clear is that the parent was trying to be a teacher, at least her idea of a teacher that she remembered from school. And this involved a lot of shouting at the pupils, not communicating as equals, and creating big expectations for the child. And the child wasn't enjoying this process, didn't understand why the relationship with the parent had changed so dramatically, and was not engaging with the learning. So the teacher said to the parent, why don't I talk to the boy as well? So the boy came in and the teacher had a chance to talk one-to-one and went through all this. And the child was very distraught, was very upset by this, and was saying, you know, I thought I was doing all right at school, but I now realize I'm stupid because my mother keeps telling me I'm stupid, and therefore I've stopped being interested in the learning. And the teacher said, okay, we've got to sort this out, and got the teacher and parent and the child all together in the room and had a talk about how they should approach this, and how the parent shouldn't try and be the teacher but should try and be a co-learner. And that made a huge amount of difference to the relationship. And after that, the parent and the child started to work much more effectively together, and the work at home started to get done. So we have to realize that when a parent supports the child's work, it's going to be different from when a teacher does that. Also in Hungary, our main partner there, Sylvia Nemeth, relayed to me an experience that she'd had. She delivers the Creative Partnerships programs in Hungary, but she's part of a group of companies which includes a big parents' website. And when schools closed down, a lot of parents started coming to this website with questions about what to do. And Sylvia was able to develop materials for parents which helped them understand how they should support their child in their learning through not being a teacher, but through being a parent. And they posted a lot of materials online. Parents found it very, very helpful. So teachers, when sending work home and when wanting to involve parents in this learning, you need to realize the role of a parent is different and devise materials specially for the parent. And this can be sent directly to the parents and give them clues and ideas about how they would go around doing that. So, Christina, you'd like to know really what we've learnt from what we've seen around the world. I think that the really important lessons that have come from the school closures is the importance of maintaining the one-to-one relationship with the pupil. And now that the pupil is back in school, it's even more important that you think about how you do this in the classroom. So it's about being able to acknowledge the individual child on a regular basis during the school day. It's not enough to make general comments to the entire class, but ways of touching base with individual children. How are you today? How are you feeling? Some comment that you know about home or their life outside constantly reinforces the sense in the child or the young person that you have seen them and you know that they are present. I remember doing a project in an upper secondary school in Norway, which was about mathematics. And as usual, we had had artists working in the class with a group of 16-year-old maths pupils. And after the end of the project, I met with the teacher, and the teacher told me the following story. He said when the artist first came in, there was a discussion with all the pupils about what project they should do together to help improve their maths learning. And what they agreed was a plan to make a rock video, essentially, about a maths class. At the end of this planning session, one of the girls in the class came up to the teacher and said, "I'm not comfortable with this idea. I don't want to participate in doing this." And the teacher looked at this young woman and realized that he had never properly looked at her before. And as he was looking at her, he realized that she knew he was seeing her properly for the first time. And there was this complete transformation in their relationship in that moment. And the teacher said, okay, you don't have to work in this project. I've seen you and I've heard you, and you can do other things whilst we're doing that. And the teacher said after that, the young person didn't participate in the project, but her maths work became much, much better because she felt she'd been seen and acknowledged. And constantly finding ways of doing this with individual pupils in your class every day is really important. The second thing we've learned is a lot of the work that teachers sent home for pupils to do required them to act independently. But if you want them to act independently, to take a project that you have set and just go off and do it, you have to teach them to do that. And you have to prepare them in class. A lot of practice in class makes pupils very dependent, that they are expecting you to guide them through every stage of the way. And you have to get them off this dependency. It's important if you're going to send them projects to do at home. It's also really important as they grow up as adults that they become less and less dependent on you. So looking at how you can deliver the curriculum in projects that send them off to work independently as much as possible is really key for their development. And I think that this was one of the big problems with the lockdown phase, is that pupils had not sufficiently been prepared to work independently like that. And that's why they became dependent on the parents. The parents couldn't support them in the same way, and the work simply didn't get done. And finally, we've learnt that we have to use the digital technology much more creatively and interactively. It's not sufficient to simply video the lecture you would have given and send it home to the child. You have to find ways to use digital technology to deliver much more interactive learning experiences. And there are a variety of new softwares which are now available, such as Mural or Miro or Mentimeter and so forth. And as teachers, it's necessary to familiarize yourself with these approaches and translate the curriculum into those formats in order to make them suitably interactive and encourage independent learning. So, Carola, you're wondering what I think are the major challenges facing teachers now pupils are back in school. Clearly, there is a lot of concern in schools about organising the school in a way that social distancing can be maintained and all the physical protection of the children and teachers can take place. Clearly, teachers are very worried about all the learning that pupils have missed and are trying to work out how to catch them up. But to me, it's of real importance that teachers develop strategies and implement activities in class which help build the well-being of children and young people, because this is what has taken the biggest knock during the school close down. And unless you address the well-being, then the learning is not going to happen. So there need to be clear strategies in class. Now, when talking about well-being, it's really important to understand what aspect of well-being that we're really talking about. We did a big project with Cambridge University a few years ago when we looked at the well-being of children and young people in school. And what we learnt from this experience is that there are two areas of well-being, one of which is feeling good and feeling healthy. And that's okay, but that is subject to all sorts of things which are outside the control of the school and the child. You know, you don't know when you're going to fall sick or something else like that, and that obviously affects your well-being. But there is another form of well-being which is of real importance, and it's known in English as eudaimonic well-being, and it is feeling that you have control over your life and that your voice is taken seriously and you are shaping your own future. And the key elements of this is that children and young people are allowed to feel competent, are allowed to feel autonomous, and are allowed to feel related to other people and their wider community. And it's these three themes of competence, autonomy, and relatedness that are really important to be able to focus on in class. How do you focus on competence? Well, actually, you focus on competence by really challenging the children, not giving them work that's too easy. Because if you give them work which they feel is easy, there is no satisfaction in being able to do it. You need to give them work which really challenges them, which is hard, because then when they achieve it, they feel they have achieved something and they feel much more competent. Now, obviously, what is difficult for one child will be different from what's difficult for another child. So there needs to be some personalization in this process. But I think it's of real importance that now they're back in school, you really challenge them, you push them, because the more you push them, actually, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to meet your new expectations. But in doing so, they're going to thrill themselves. And the autonomy is about the independence that I was talking about before. Give them work and let them work it out. Stop catching them early. Stop teaching them that as soon as they get stuck, they should ask you. You should be pushing it back and go, how do you get out of this situation? How do you resolve this issue? So they get into the habit of solving it themselves. And the relatedness is about working on the relationships. And that's really important. And in all this area, I believe the arts have a critical role to play, not necessarily as separate subjects, but using the arts within science or maths or the humanities, because it's through the arts that the pupils can learn to express their ideas, their feelings and their thoughts. It gives them a much richer vocabulary, a much richer way of expressing all those ideas. And through that, they can communicate to you what it is they want to do, what it is that they want to achieve, and you can use that to help set their targets, their way of progressing through the curriculum, and ensure that it is challenging, that it is doing all the things that it needs to do, but it's led by their ideas and their ability to express these things to you. So finally, you'd like some ideas about what to do with the teachers and the Kulturschulen when you meet them at the beginning of October. Well, I suggest that you get them into small groups of 2 or 3. Have one Kulturschulen in each group and ask them to discuss the following 5 questions. The first one is, now the pupils are back, what has changed? The second one is, what hasn't changed? What things have stayed exactly the same? The third one is, how have your digital skills improved? What are the new things that you're now able to do digitally in order to support pupil learning? The fourth one are, what are the main challenges that you think you now face now the pupils are back in school? And finally, what skills do you need to develop in order to meet those challenges? Are there new things that you need to do and you need to be able to do in order to meet the new challenges which having all the pupils back in school are presenting to you? I think after they have had a good chance to talk about it in their small groups, each group should report back what they concluded from those. And that information, I think, will be very useful for you to help work out what additional support to provide to the teachers and the Kulturschulen as they start their program again and begin to work with schools during this forthcoming academic year. So I hope that's been really helpful. It's great that you managed to come here and that we could have this conversation face to face. And now I wish you a very safe journey back to Germany and look forward, I hope, to being able to see you later in the year. But before I go, I also want to mention that after the training, I'm very happy to organize some Zoom sessions between me and individual teachers or teachers and Kulturschulen to discuss some of the issues you're finding in the classroom and how this program that you're going to be engaged with this year can help. So what I'd want you to do, obviously, is talking to Christina and Petra and Carola, express your interest in having such a Zoom meeting, and I will make myself available at times that work for you in order to talk to you. And I hope I get a chance to talk to most of you over the next few weeks. I know that you're going on a break, holiday break, shortly with the teachers, so this will be after they come back in October and early November. I look forward to talking to people more then, and thanks again for coming.